Okay. Good morning, Tal.
Hi, Sherry.
So I'm here with Tal Hartuv, who's coming to us from somewhere in, can I say your city?
My shtetl, yeah.
Settle from Zichron Yaakov, a beautiful, beautiful place. And I'm speaking to Tal from my home in Haifa. So I wanted to touch bases with you because for a while there, you had gone into radio silence and we didn't hear anything publicly from you for quite a while. And all of a sudden, here you are popping up in this interview and that interview and this post and that post. And I was wondering what made you come back to public life?
Um, okay, it's a very good question. Uh, as you know, I'd spent quite a number of years regurgitating what happened to me, simply with the goal of trying to get Western governments to stop funding the Palestinian Authority, who then reward my would-be murderers.
Mhm.
And I don't know how many times I spoke, in the hundreds of times. And it was two things, Sherry. One is I felt that I'd done as much as I could. I wasn't reinventing the wheel. Everything's on record. There's articles, there's videos, and of course, retelling what happened to me had a terrible mental cost. So I was very fragile, I think, by all of that, and I knew that I have to at the time I thought, that's it, I've done it. I'm going to go into anonymity, and then I legally changed my name. Because the other thing was I was simply known, and understandably why, but I was simply known for what happened to me, this terrible barbaric terror attack. And I did have like a little sunshine moment when, if I summarize it in Mickey Mouse language, it's like, no, 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 this isn't who I am. This is what happened to me. And there's also a metamorphosis of how I was introduced over the years. In the beginning, it was a victim of terror, and that made my skin crawl, although I understand that I was a victim of terror. And in that sense, what happened then will always make me a victim then. But I didn't want to live in, like, just be known as a victim. It like there's nothing so unkind, in a way, inadvertently, not intentional, but there's nothing so unkind as being forgive me, but held hostage in perpetual victimhood. And so then I reframed the narrative, and I thought, no, call me a survivor of terrorism, which is also true, also true. It's like Xena, the warrior princess, right? And and then I thought, that's not who I am either. It's part of who I am. And then, of course, that's when I changed my name to Tal, and that's who I am now. I'm just Tal, and I have had something very bad happen to me in my life. Like many people have had very, very many bad things happen to them. And I've also had a lot of good things happen to me. So that was the reason I changed my name. And then, because I do have the gift of the gab, and I realized that people can listen to me. And when October the 7th happened, I'd been 3.5 years in anonymity, working as a guide and an educator in the Yad Vashem. And after October the 7th, I thought, okay, I have to use my voice. That's all I can do. I have to use my voice. So I I remember putting a Facebook post, which I then had a very like 50 people, real friends, and everybody shared, and then bang, we're off like a cannon.
What did you,
So
what did you feel that you had to talk about?
um, oh yes, I know what it was. This is very soon after October the 7th, when I got on CNN and Fox News, like big media. And then this is what I wanted to tell them. I said, this is not just Hamas. There are several factions of these Palestinian terror groups. And I also said, look at the Hamas footage. There's thousands of innocent civilians. And I wanted to also say there's the UNRWA cars, yeah, and these are things I've been talking about for years. So I wanted to harness this narrative, which Israel always falls into, that it's only one particular terror group, and everyone else there is completely innocent. And I do not buy that. And the footage of these terrorists on that day show us too. In fact, Mia Shem, who was held in captivity for several weeks, she came out and she said, there's no innocent civilians in Gaza. And I knew then, I knew where the narrative was going to go. I knew that if these protests would be allowed, these so-called pro-Palestinian protests would be allowed on European and American streets, I knew where it would lead. And I wanted to, how do you say, like cut it off before it happened. And I remember I did an interview with German TV too, and they were shocked. It's like, why are you talking about this? This isn't going to happen. And bingo. So I spoke about that because I felt that what we were looking at was through the micros, it was through a microscope and not through a telescope or a wide angle lens. And the terror factors and the enabling of this kind of terrorism and the funding of this terrorism is what I wanted to bring to attention. And it's been widely ignored, at our own fault too, by the way, because, you know, we've always wanted to, we bought into this, the humanitarian crisis. Maybe I haven't been there, but I tell you, the humanitarian crisis is that we have all these dear people held hostage in tunnels in Gaza. That's the humanitarian crisis.
Absolutely. Tell me, has the message that you feel it's important to put across changed over the 15 months?
Yes. I mean, the axiom that this is a righteous war, there's no gray area here, right? This is a just and righteous war. That has not changed. What has changed has become, since the possibility of my would-be murderers being released, then I felt that this is a deal. It's a terrible deal, an absolutely terrible deal. But it's not a this or that. And I feel that Jewish history, the way we as a people have held on to survival all through these years, this idea of paradox, this is something that we have to embrace. And I felt, because where I was now thrown into this new situation, which is one of rabid injustice for me. I mean, I really don't know what I'm going to do with myself. I have to take it one moment at a time. But the possibility of this injustice and the possibility also of, you know, these poor hostages not getting free. We want one situation to resolve the other, right? And it just doesn't. And I've said in a previous interview, it's having the ability to hold compassion and mercy and an absolute must to get these hostages out in one hand. And on the other hand, is to make sure that this is also a terrible injustice, not to just people like myself, but for the future victims who will, with almost certainty, be murdered by these barbarians who are going to be let out of Israeli jails. Look, and that's kind of the elephant in the room, right? Because we're not talking about the soldiers who will need to go back and fight and who will lose their lives, right? So there's a price in this everywhere you look. Also for me, Sherry, and you've interviewed my friend's family, right? But when I'm speaking and I'm pushing forward, I'm saying, yes, we must get these people out. And then on the other hand, there is the other hand. It's very complicated for me because I certainly don't want to speak in the name of anybody else. Like to make it really like a naked interview, so to speak. Am I bringing Christine's parents more a sense of injustice? They're incredibly decent people and they've never told me what to say or given their opinion. But that's also in the back of my mind. Am I doing an injustice to Christine's family?
Have you been in touch with them? Have you asked them what they're feeling about what the possibility that their daughter's murderers will go free?
I don't want to talk about that here. I think that's for them to say.
Okay. Very good. Now, I can, from my own background as a psychotherapist working with trauma survivors and also with abusers, I can say that I know how torturous it is when a survivor who managed to go to court and get her perpetrator actually put into jail, the thought of him or her coming out on probation after however many years is something that's unbearable. And so,
So listen, you're right as a therapist, absolutely, and you're right as a human being. And I think that if we'd have held on to Jewish wisdom, uh, then we wouldn't have found ourselves in this mess.
what do you mean?
Aside from the terrible duplicity of the West, where we're fighting, as Douglas Murray says, where we're fighting with one hand behind our back. What I mean is there's a truism in the Talmud which says, he who is kind to the cruel shall be cruel to the kind. Now, certainly regarding this hostage deal, right? If we had implemented the death penalty for unremorseful terrorists years ago, it would have saved my taxpayers' money, and yours. But we wouldn't be in this situation. We don't have to make a big hoo-ha and, just quietly execute them, make it judicial, make it a legislation. But by being kind to the cruel, by saying, oh, you know what, we're all going to put you in your factions. You can all pray certain times a day. We're just going to keep the peace. We're going to make it, we don't want any riots here. So really these murderers have the best lives they could possibly have under lock and key. But because we haven't been wise in our judgment and necessity of dealing with barbarity, we've ended up hurting these people we don't intend to hurt. It's a re-victimization.
Okay,
And
so
that's actually an ethical disaster.
so how do you take care of your own mental health now when you're facing the possibility that Christine's murderers will go free and your torturers will go free? How do you take care of yourself? Um,
Oh, I smoke a lot. But no, what I try and do, or what I'm trying to do, okay, I'm still trying to keep to my routine. I go out, watch birds, I take the dogs for a hike, I try and read a little bit. Uh, so there's those basic necessities of some kind of a healthy life. But the other thing is, it's very important, what suffering does to a human being. If I can use the metaphor of a camera, right? You've got a big zoom lens taking photos of birds. And when you suffer, all you see through that long lens is you. And that's okay. That's not a how do you say, a spot on someone's character. It's a normal, natural human process. And that certainly happened to me over the last few years. I mean, you could never get in my empathy books unless you'd been stabbed 19 times, right? I mean, it sounds awful now that I'm saying this. So when we suffer, our world naturally only becomes about us. And then with the passage of time, and I don't want to talk about healing, but the effect that time has on us, it's almost like you've got that long lens and you're bringing it in. And when you bring it in, what you're seeing through the lens becomes wider. Other things come into the view screen. So how am I? I think I have mentally progressed. I've made a lot of mental, how do you say? I don't want to use the word healing. It's so glib. Progress over the last few years. And I think a part of that is just by default, I've been able, or people have barged into my life with kindness, didn't even knock on the door. So, and I've also of course, I've met thousands of people all over the world, and I've met other people who have suffered greatly. I've been translating testimonies of Holocaust survivors, actually even October the 7th survivors. So what it's done is it's reduced my own sense of self-importance, which hasn't been easy to do. And it's given room for space in my life for other people.
and
And so
from what
sorry.
pardon that from what I have seen in another interview that you did, and also from personal conversation, is that you've also been able to see the families of the hostages who are going to benefit from the release of these terrorists, including your own. And
Yeah, I had an interview with Ilan Dalal, whose son Guy. There's plenty of footage of him being brutalized in I think, a Palestinian civilian truck. And I told Ilan, and it's true. I have no idea what you must be feeling. I have no idea. And likewise, he has no idea what I'm feeling, and that doesn't actually matter. It's a non sequitur. We don't have to understand each other's feelings. But I told him it's not this or that. And I told him after you've been in tears and we get Guy back, Bezrat Hashem, I'm the first one to jump for joy that our hostages have come home. Really, no strings attached. And then after I'm celebrating, I should have told him this, but I was pushed for time or whatever. I had to finish the interview. But after I've celebrated and wept with Elan's family, I'm going to go to another protest down the road, which is against this deal. You know what I mean? Like there's nuance here, not against the deal, but I can identify. I'm there for these bereaved families of soldiers. I'm there for people who are in a similar situation to myself. And I think it's what we're seeing here is much bigger than just a terrible spot in the time in the universe. All right. If you look, even, I mean, you know me, I'm a tour guide and I love the Tanakh. And there's an amazing passage. There's a few amazing passages, which I think we also have to bring back our text into this dialogue. I think it's very important. There's a couple of things. One is this is a struggle, right? This can turn into be a societal struggle, which can be lethal. It might tear our country to shreds, or this could, if it's navigated rightly, this could become a platform where we as a people can become the best we can be. And I'm leaning more towards that, right? Even though, let's say in my situation, what happened to me, it's like I would never have dreamed, expected, hoped, anticipated, believed that I could have a semi-articulate conversation with you 14 years later, right? So if we take that idea of believing, dreaming, anticipating, imagining, hoping, we can implicate that to apply that to ourselves too.
You
I
mean
don't see that as totally dark.
because I hear these words, it sounds great. I want to say yay, but what do you really mean?
What do you mean? I mean, don't you know me? I mean what I say and I say what I mean.
I know I want you to say more. I want you to
Um,
describe to me. You say we can be what the best we are supposed to be. What does that mean? What is
I
the
mean, okay, I mean, we don't have to resolve our feelings on both sides of this terrible, terrible situation. Like one doesn't overcome the other, one isn't superseding the other, one isn't more important than the other. Justice isn't more important than mercy. Mercy is not more important than justice. They have to be held in tension. So what I mean, if we're talking rasmi, tachlis, straight, is someone in my position who's burning for justice. I have to go to my brother and my sister in Israel, who are, these hostages, the family hostages. And I have to understand that their pain will temper or balance my sense of outrage. It will balance it with the necessary compassion that they need. All right. I want to hear from them. I'm not asking for them to do this now. I think everything is about time. But I want to hear from the hostage families. Tal, we understand. Oh my God, we don't know what you've been through. It's not the time. They're in the middle of their terrible, elongated, unthinkable pain. But I do believe a time will come where we will be able to say this to each other. I'm 14 years down the road. Of course, this invokes new, fresh emotions, but I still have that 14 years where a lot of stuff went on. And it has given me a slightly different perspective. Time doesn't heal, but it enables us to step back and look and say, okay, I can see it a little bit different. I can be a little tiny bit more objective. And that's what I think it means.
okay. And you bring in the perspective of time, 14 years. Right now, we're a year and a half into the war. And that is just a flash in the pan of Jewish history. So if we want to expand our perspective, how do you see today, what we're going through today within the perspective of our history?
Okay, well, okay, a couple of remarks. One is about the Holocaust and one is about the Bible, the Tanakh, all right? There was a Holocaust historian who coined a very profound phrase, and it related to the Judenrat and the Jewish people in the ghetto. You have this Jewish leadership who are answerable to these Nazis. And whichever way the Judenrat looked, it was a no-win situation. It's no-win situation. And this historian, I can't remember his name, he said it was choiceless choices. And that's exactly, it's a repetitive situation, right? We find ourselves historically, again, in the present with choiceless choices. Hold that thought. But then, look, I was kind of obsessed with on the day I was attacked, I was obsessed later on, obviously, but what the parasha was, and it was Parashat Vayichi. And it's one of the most astonishing, it reads like a novel, right? It's so emotional. And it's like Jacob, or let's call it Israel, his name was already Israel. After 22 years, he was reunited with his estranged son. And when you read that parasha, it brings a tear to my eye. Even before I was attacked, the whole story of Joseph was like, wow. And that's why I use these adjectives, or are they verbs? I don't know. Earlier on, when I said believed, hoped, imagined, dreamed, because that's what you have in the Hebrew text. It's like, there he is, Israel's busy dying, he's an old man. And then Joseph comes and meets him, and he brings the grandkids, even the grandkids. And Israel says, I would have never have filalti, pilel. I would have never have filalti that I would see you again, let alone the grandchildren. And you can hear the emotion. And of course, the English translation is so weak and inadequate. And there's a Rabbi, David Aaron, who says, if you look at that word, which is actually the word for prayer as well, it's like, what is the text saying? It's saying Israel never would have believed, imagined, hoped, dreamt that this would happen. And that's the case with the hostages. This was the parasha on my attack, all right? So I'm sure these hostage families, when Bezrat Hashem, they get their loved ones back. And for all Israel, it would be, we never thought we would have believed and loved, hoped for. But if you carry on reading that parasha, and this deals with the injustice side, that's the mercy side. And the injustice side is this, that after all these years, Yosef is reunited with those who wanted him dead, who had wanted him dead. And he looks them in the eye and he says, well, you know what? What man meant for evil, God meant for good. And this isn't a fluffy, I'm the least fluffy person I know. I think I'm much more of a cynic and pragmatic. But sometimes justice takes a little time. Sometimes we don't always see it in our lifetime. But I think the only reason I believe in God is because I believe in justice. And justice is so sweet and so necessary for any human being to function on any normal level, but it doesn't always come at my timetable. So I can hope and believe and long and yearn for the justice, as I can hope and believe and long and yearn for our hostages to come home.
That really, you know what? I'm so glad that you said that you brought this in, because this is the first time that I've heard something that explains how we can hold the both together. That really does it.
Look, I hope anyway. Look, other thing, did I tell you? I don't remember. I can't even remember if it was in this interview. but the very name, when Jacob, he wrestled, and Yaakov wrestled, and it says with Elohim v'manashim, like he wrestled with God and with man, and he prevailed, and that's when he became Israel. And what are we doing now? We're just reliving our history, right? We are wrestling with ourselves. We're wrestling with these ethical issues. We're wrestling with suffering. And once again, it's like we will prevail because we don't have a choice.
Oh, that's very powerful. This is the first time I've heard it put in those terms, and it does really hit. And
Right.
it hits and it excites me and calms me down at the same time, which again, everything is paradoxical, isn't it? It's this and that.
Nachon. That's what we have to get back. We have to get the this and that. Really, we can't read, we can't live our life through a view screen of imposed ideals. I mean, I know we're a liberal democracy. Democracy is great, yay! But it's a later invention, all right. We have more. Well, there's more to our people than being a democratic liberal nation. It's the way we think. We don't think linearly. You mentioned time, right? We don't think this is the beginning and this is the end. It's Margaret said it. We're always moving. It's concentric rather. And we have to understand that how we think determines it's cognitive behavior therapy, right? You know this, Sherry. We can do it on a textual basis too. Is how we think determines how we feel in the end. What's true, whether you're in trauma, if I think that I shouldn't have brought my friend to Israel. Oh, I didn't stab him hard enough. I feel so guilty. And by the way, survivor's guilt is a very difficult, sticky
Yes,
issue.
yes.
But if I can't change, modify my way of thinking, I'm going to feel no self-worth. I'm going to feel suicidal. And I did. I'm not ashamed to say it. But when I could change my thinking, that impacted how I feel. So what is true on the personal level of, personal trauma, I believe it can be true on the national level too. We have to look and see how we used to think as a people.
Okay, so the best that we can become, what you mean then is our being able to synthesize what's happening to us in a more productive way, in a new way, where we are able to contain this and this.
Yeah, not mix them together. That's the it's like a cocktail, but it's not like a cocktail. It's like a chaser, right? You have one, sorry, that's a terrible example, but I can't think of anything else to say. Yeah, because we don't want you can't interpret, you can't, let's put it in a musical example. Any musicians out there, you have a chord called a suspended fourth, right? And you listen to it and it's like not quite the end of the song, right? The music needs to resolve. And we as Jews, and especially with this current situation, we're always in a state of a suspended fourth, and it's not going to resolve itself. We are going to have to learn to live with it. But then again, there's something about always living in tension, which ironically, that's what gives us the zest for life, right? I mean, maybe it's my artistic musician weirdo personality, but
Living,
I don't want to feel nice about things.
it's exhausting.
It's exhausting. No, it's not exhausting.
Living with tension, constant tension.
No, no, because I'm also capable of going out, taking photos of birds, sitting in nature. I found some kind of I don't know what to call it. Like sounds a bit vegan, but like centeredness. I found some ground where I feel I can stand firm. I do find that I'm not swung about. Of course, I feel terrible. I told you in the beginning, I don't know what I'll do if they get out. I probably do know what I'll do. I'll just carry on taking the dogs and going for a hike and speaking to you. I know what I'll do. I'll just carry on as normal.
Okay, carry on as normal with it not being something that doesn't come with work. It comes with work for that you've done you're doing the emotional and cognitive work to be able to reach the kind of conclusions that you're telling me about today.
Oh no, of course it comes with work. And like I say, for me, the injustice has to be tempered or can be tempered or moderated for my own ease by being around people who are on the other side of the other
Yes.
side of heal by hearing their pain, which hasn't even got a language invented for it yet. So, and I do think it's this bringing of, I don't know how to say it because we're so soaked in society with platitudes and meaningless, self-help books and inspiration. And I find inspiration so uninspiring. All right. I'm a practical girl. I want to like the meat and the bones of the matter. But I do think that if we can find a way of, if I was going to say bringing hearts together, but that's the fluffy bit, just sitting down with somebody who's experiencing also very turbulent emotions, but for different reasons than me. And that we don't bite each other's head off, but we learn empathy. Empathy has to be learned. All right. We're not born so much with empathy. Or if we are, it's erased very quickly, and especially in the society that we live in today, right? I mean, this dialogue about the deal and things, the vitriol that different people express is, while it might feel justified because of the height of the emotions, it is, b'lashon ha'ama'ata, to put it very mildly, it's extremely unhelpful.
Yes.
We are what we say. You know what I mean? It all starts with words, and anybody, anywhere can help heal our nation
Yes.
by thinking twice before they put a stupid comment on Facebook, right? A hurtful comment. Think twice.
Yeah.
All right. Words hurt and words heal. And I don't think we understand the power of words and what we do to each other through
We have
them.
another less than 5 minutes, and this Zoom is going to shut us off. But there were two things that you said. I mean, two things among all the incredible stuff that you said that stick with me. One is the comment of us being faced over time with choiceless choices, which I think is something we have to hang on to and understand that we have been faced with choiceless choices from the beginning of this war. And the other thing was that you said about yourself, you don't want to stay to remain a perpetual hostage of victimhood, which is what's important, I think, for all of us. Know that when we lash out at each other because those that don't agree with us, isn't that a sign of perhaps remaining? I wouldn't say victimhood is a little bit strong, but that kind of sense. Do you understand? Does it make sense what I'm saying?
No.
It's like being a hostage of our own emda, maybe of our own position, thinking that if we open up like you're doing to be able to see the other, then something's going to something bad might happen to us.
Okay, I got it. I got what you mean. I
Okay.
got what, okay, so I have an idea, right? I got what you mean. And and it's a little bit related. When I changed my name, I mean, I was so glad to do it on one hand, right? I was so exhausted from being well known, and I did have a lot of moments that it'd be like, well, what am I going to be like? Who am I without this now? I mean, I'd forgotten who I was before that. And then the only identity I had was what I was like vis-a-vis the attack. And it was like, what is it going to be like when I don't have this anymore? I'm going to be just an empty shell. And I had to make a decision. If I'm an empty shell, I'll be the best empty shell that I can be. And so there is a place where, and I think it's, people say I'm brave. I think that's very brave of me, like to risk, to let go, and I think I've become a better person for it. And I think that's true in the national narrative, right? None of us lose if we let let them loose a little bit. Our political narratives or our emotional narratives that drive our political understanding. I don't think we lose in the end. It just makes our heart, we're walking around like with no skin on,
Yeah.
but our heart, everybody can see our heart. That's what it's like.
Yes. Wow. There's some very powerful ideas here, and I really appreciate your sharing them with me. and with whoever's going to also watch this video. So
Thanks, Cheryl.
thank you very much, Tal.
Thank you. Take care. Say hi to Haifa.
Okay, bye bye. Bye, Zina.
Bye.
Bye.